Hello and welcome to the show. This is the cold opening version of the thing because apparently my Stream Deck decided to let me down as our mod put it in the pregame. It's like, hey, the sound check's working fine, everything's good. So the show's going to get really super strange, and we're off to a great start. Welcome. This is the ComicBase live stream, and this is the sort of technical excellence that you've come to appreciate from us over all this time. This, I believe, is our 138th, 139th show, something like that. Crazy. But anyway, in all this time, we still are trying to get it all to work. Anyway, I'm your host, Pete Bickford. I will be talking about foreign comics in ComicBase and all the weird issues associated with that as we go. But before that, a little bit of ComicBase news and some other things, Prime Day, and a little bit about Comic-Con. But we'll get into it straight away. First of all, I want to say hi to the folks who are here. Richard Scott was first in the house here. Welcome. Fred Slota says aloha. Greg Hector, of course, our mod is keeping things going here from South Jersey. Ed Billiot from out in Richmond. Oro, from the glorious summer day in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm always fascinated with the Minneapolis weather reports. I give you way too much time and attention on this show, but it's as a former resident of Minneapolis, I'm not at all surprised. Anyway, Xanadu Comics, Jet City Comics, Pete Krychek, hey, welcome. Thomas B, Fabian von Drescha from Belgium, hey, Willkommen, which is not right, but Belgium, I just gonna assume the German's one of the languages y'all speak. Anyway, Scruffy from upstate New York. Anyway, welcome everyone. So we're going to get into it here. First of all, a little bit of news on the ComicBase front. We are at ComicBase version 23.3.0. I believe it's 3026 or 3027. Oh, and Rob, yeah, hi to Rob Weibank as well. We put out a little kind of patch-up build this morning. A couple little futzy issues as we're kind of like dotting our I's and crossing our T's here as we're getting more serious about our next release. But we still put this one out there. There's a fixed an issue that Steve Dazinger pointed out about if you do a title-based search, say find all the publishers from Dark Horse and then do certain sorting operations on it, you can trigger an error as you try to leave the dialogue. That is no longer a thing. Also, if you ever are checking for updates and you've just made changes to your preferences and it found a program update, this won't happen a lot for a lot of you, but in case it does, it now saves down your preference changes before it does. More importantly, I think, and this one kind of embarrassingly, it's been in the program for a while and we never discovered it until now. Thank you to the person who pointed out there was a typo in the grading evaluation points for if the only thing wrong with the comic book you're looking at is the paper color is cream/tan. Yes, this is a remarkably specific grading issue. But if that was the only thing wrong with the comic book in question, it was being given the wrong grade, and so in the grading wizard. So now typically you wouldn't have that unless you had about half a dozen other problems with the comic book. But if that was your thing, if you had perfectly aged comic books except for somehow the paper had gone slightly off, it now gives the proper grade. So that's been fixed. Anyway, thank you for the folks who pointed that one out. And feel free to download that one from the ComicBase website. If you go onto in ComicBase, and if you said under preferences, if you said to show interim updates, if you then go to internet and say check for updates, you'll see the new build. If not, if you feel like those are all things that are very compelling to you, you can always download the latest version of ComicBase from the download links at comicbase.com under your registrations. Okay, on to other things. Let's see. I'm going to Comic-Con next week. This is not a joke, not a pretend story, not an actual thing. So I'm heading back to San Diego the first time in a couple of years, and I'll be doing this just as a civilian. But if you guys happen to see me on the show floor, please, by all means, stop by, say hi, and I have a standing thing that if you're anywhere on the ComicBase leaderboard in terms of corrections, I absolutely am happy to buy you a drink. So just feel free to collect if just you happen to feel like it, and you see me down there in the Gas Lamp District or down at the show floor. If I'm in the bathroom, just leave me alone. But anyway, anything else, please say. Honestly, you get to a point where, as awesome as Comic-Con is, the thing that's really fun about the entire show is just seeing the folks, just seeing people you've been hanging out with and chatting with, whether online or in real life for many, many years. And I'm officially one of the old guys now because that's now my favorite bit. So anyway, that's a thing. By the way, speaking of Comic-Con, the SAG-AFTRA strike. So you guys all know about the Writers Guild strike. That's still going, and it seems like they're making no headway whatsoever about settling their issues, with the writers' rooms. But more concerning even than that is the Screen Actors Guild, the SAG-AFTRA, the United Unions of that, and the actors of film and television, something or other. But anyway, it looks like they've taken a strike authorization vote. They gave like a 97%. Yes, we want to go. We authorize the strike. They extended the negotiations through the 12th, which of course is today. But unless out of nowhere all their demands are met, which doesn't look like it's going to happen unless you guys know something I don't know, it looks like they're probably going to strike as well, which means that all the Hollywood stuff that you plan to see at Comic-Con is going to be significantly different. At the very least, don't expect to see a lot of people involved with either the creation of the show from writing perspective or the actors. And that's going to be kind of a bummer. But for the rest of us who are going there for the other pop culture things and the games and the comic books and everything else that comes with Comic-Con, because it is a huge extravaganza. It's just so much stuff going on that whole thing. We should have a lot of cool things to see. I'm not going to be doing a live stream next week because, in my experience, it is absolutely impossible to broadcast from the bunker, which is the concrete Faraday cage, which is the San Diego Convention Center, unless they've done something very different in the last couple of years since I did it last, or unless you paid like $1 jillion, and I do mean like $1 jillion for a wired internet connection. But if that doesn't apply, and it will not apply to me, then the idea of having anything go on that is going to have a consistent stream bandwidth is probably beyond the pale. But I will try to post some interesting things as I find them, and see if I can put that on the channel as we go. If nothing else, I'll come back with a show report and tell you what I found when I get back. All right. So with all that said, let's get into it, and let's talk about foreign comic book. Oh, I'm sorry, I had one more thing on my notes. Prime Day. So Amazon is having their little thing today. So if you're a Prime member, they want to give you all sorts of reasons to be thankful, and if you're not a Prime member, they want to give you lots of reasons to want to join up and spend I think it's $149 now per year, but they do bundle a lot of stuff with it in terms of the free shipping, the Amazon Prime for the movies and television. They have Prime Music. They have Prime Gaming. It goes on and on and on. But anyway, the main event for the next, I don't know, 12 hours or so is they're having a big sale on various things. And I'm going to say I've looked through the list of offers, and I've kind of like, of all of the stuff on there, I've kind of got it all that I'm interested in. So, but if you by all means, have a look at Amazon.com and have a look. But anything that was cool, I've kind of already picked up on, with the exception of I found that you can never have enough SSD drives in your life. And the one standout bargain for me of the entire show, of the entire Prime Day, is the Samsung SSDs. The 980 Pro series of SSDs is unbelievably cheap right now. The 1 terabyte version is $50. The 2 terabyte version is like $99.95, and these things are absolute screamers. If you do not have, if you are still using an old style hard drive for your computer, good Lord, do yourself a favor and upgrade today. These are they're called NVMe versions, so they're the kind that looks like a stick of memory, with the pins on the wrong end. So you need a motherboard that supports that. If you have an older style one, so in other words, if you have something where you can plug an actual hard drive into it, it's called a SATA connection, SATA. They do have the SATA versions. They're a bit slower, but they have the SATA versions of the same drives for even less. I want to say you can get the 1 terabyte version of their SSD for like $40 now. Good Lord, there is no excuse to not upgrade at this point. And even if you want to go for using SSDs as your larger storage, I believe I saw SSDs up to 8 terabytes for less than $400. So do check it out. It's you will not look back at all, and it probably runs 10, 20 or more times faster than your current hard drive. And for a computer program like ComicBase that's all about the disk, that is absolutely life-changing. So if like I say, if you're still running an old school hard drive, stop this minute and get yourself upgraded, because it will make a huge difference in your life. All right, with that said, let's go and let's talk about foreign comic books. And let me see if I can bring up the right monitor on this one. Let's go switch over to that. And I'm going to try to pull myself up in a key. And that's the part where Companion wasn't working. And that could get a little bit interesting on this one. So give me just a sec if I see if I can fit this in. If not, then we're going to have to do this one with just my mellifluous voice and not and and no pictures right now. Yeah, it looks like that's where we're stuck right now. Companion, by the way, if you guys care, is software that connects my Stream Deck for with Stream Deck is a controller for doing live streams and things like that. Companion is a thing that connects all that stuff up with the ability to control different aspects, including the ATEM, keying controls and stuff like that. And they've just released a version 3.0.0 almost, and unfortunately it was incompatible with the 2 version that we had before, and the installer looks like it kind of frots things on the back end, so things are a little weird on the whole thing. So all our fancy effects that we're used to on the whole thing looks like they're not going to be happening for this particular show. So you know what, we're going to live with it. It'll all be cool. All right, so with that said, when you want to do foreign comic books, so let's back up just a touch. I'll bring myself back on camera just for a second. So ComicBase started out, obviously, I'm a US guy. I've been collecting US comic books my whole life, but you're always kind of aware that around the rest of the world there are actually people who collect different things. It's just that, other than trips to foreign lands and things like that, you don't have a chance to really encounter that many of them as as an American. Marvel UK had a big thing in the early 90s when ComicBase was getting going, bringing some of their British titles and British versions of their characters into the US in mainstream distribution. We saw things like Judge Dredd and other British comic books from like Rebellion and Fleetway got some mainstream distribution once upon a time. But even then, very exotic to most Americans to do things like this. The closest we often saw was things like Canadian cover price versions of, regular comic books. So every once in a while, you'd see something from just north of the border where it came in from like it's 35 cents in the U.S. and it's 40 cents in Canada. That kind of thing would come up. And sometimes they even went and had completely different covers. So if you lived in upstate New York and you went across the border, to the 7-Eleven or something, you might have seen the next issue of Daredevil had a completely different cover than the one you expected, based on the U.S. Numbering and so forth. But for the most part, the U.S. distribution has been pretty unified. So getting the foreign information into ComicBase was a long spread coming, and it wasn't until around ComicBase 10 or 12 or so where we started adding a lot of support for foreign currencies into the program that we really kind of took off with the database. Even then, if when you sit there and we say, like, we list most comic books since 1878, which really, when we're saying 1878, we're really talking about the boys comics that would have eventually morph into what we think of as comic books today. We always have it in the marketing as like, oh, and foreign comic books too, because even though we've added probably 1.6 million, or I'm sorry, God, I'm sorry, getting the numbers wrong on this one. Anyway, even though we've added several 100,000 foreign comic books and the whole thing, it's a big world out there, and we're constantly discovering new series that haven't come along. So when you see things that aren't in the database that exist as comic books, oftentimes it's because they're foreign and we just haven't seen it. I mean, we don't have a lot of exposure into, say, Peruvian comic books, even though they exist. We have some, yeah, but in terms of like the grand history like we have in America, nah, that's where our blind spots come out, especially if you get into things like independent comic books or very old comic books as well. So when we look at foreign comic books, how do we handle all this stuff? So all right, to start with, let's get to the right monitor on this one and flip my keyboard over the right thing. So the short version is, for most people, for most mainstream foreign comic books, you handle them just like you handle anything else. I mean, so I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff on this live stream because I've written notes that'll make the whole process look super duper scary. So I'll give you the part right at the front, which I hope gives you some hope to say, yeah, I mean, most of what people will do in ComicBase, let's say you've got a Superman comic book from, Navarro. Um, um, you're just going to type in, the first couple letters of the whole thing. You'll see that it chases up to you right there. You hit return. It's going to show you, let me boom out. Here's all the lists here. So this is, I believe, the Mexican version of Superman, from 1952 to 1985. And if you're holding on to a copy of, Superman from Navarro number, 83 or whatever the thing is, you're just going to type in Superman from Navarro, go down to the appropriate issue. Here's issue number 285, and say, okay, yeah, I got it. I have one copy of it. It's in near mint condition. Some things you'll notice are a little different here. To start with, is you'll notice that the currency down here is, let me zoom in on this one. The currency up here is MXP, not USD. So currency codes across the world are standardized. So the first two letters refer to the nation's official UN code. Abbreviation MX is Mexico, US is United States, obviously. GB is Great Britain, so forth. And then the last letter is the unit of currency. So P is pesos, USD is US dollars, D for dollars. Funny thing, though, after a while is you'll actually see some currencies change over time. So when you get into the Romanian currencies and so forth, they will have several letters after them, over the course of time, because their currencies have come up and failed and been replaced 3-4 times within modern history. And that's less it's less unlikely than you would wish, but it does actually happen. Anyway, with that said, in terms of entering the comic book itself, if I have a copy of Superman from Navarro number 285 in near mint condition, just go up there, type a 1 for the quantity, boom, boom, done and done. And so that's all you got to do. Well, okay, so if that's all we got to do, then what's the show about? Well, okay, it gets a lot more interesting if we didn't have the comic book in stock to start with. And that's where most of what we'll be talking about today starts with. So let's say you're staring at this strange comic book, Le Monk, or something from Belgium or France or so forth. And you're trying to figure out where it all goes. And here's where I'm going to give a succession of advice, which it can get a little labyrinthine. Please, flag me down in the comments if so. And I will try to be as consistent as I can be about the whole thing, or at least as coherent as I can be about the whole thing as we move on. So we'll start with this one. So the very first thing when you go with a title in ComicBase that doesn't exist before is you're going to come up there and you're going to start typing a new title. So let's go ahead and invent a new series that does not exist yet. So I'm going to go up here under comic books. I'm going to go and I'm going to click the new comic book title right over here. And I'm just going to type a new thing here. So let's invent a mythical second series of Die Spinne. So Die Spinne is the German version of Spider-Man. Now, the weirdness starts right at the start, because you might think that I would write in Die Spinne like that, second series, right? But here's where you have to also say things like, okay, well, Die Spinne means the spider, right? And which is, as we all know from library style lettering, the German Die, Der, and Das are three different ways of saying the. And just as in America, the article, when you're titling something, such as in English, the articles are the, a, or an. And that comes at the end of the title. So you don't call it Die Spinne, you would call it Spinne, die. And if we start doing that, we will notice as we do this one that comma D is this. There's already a bunch of titles like that in the database right now. All right, so let's talk about some of these titles that are in here already. So when we are naming a title in ComicBase, we prefer, if the title is absolutely unique, it's never been done before, it's, The Adventures of Wonder Dude, right? We'll just call it Adventures of Wonder Dude, comma, the, and, you'll just add it to the database and, you hit OK and you're done, right? You put in the publisher, so forth. When it's ambiguous, and oftentimes with foreign editions of things, because a huge amount of stuff is foreign editions of American comic books, or at least comic books that became popular in one country and traveled the world from there. When it's ambiguous, we prefer to start with, if you can if it was published by a different publisher in different places, we prefer that to be the first thing that we would go with, because you can see it easily in the indicia of the comic book, either right on the cover or as soon as you open up the first page and stare out the small print. And so you'll see that we have Die Spinne from Williams, and we have Die Spinne from Condor. All right. And these ones, Die Spinne from Williams, that was I'm going to say the German publisher, not sure entirely. But when it switched over to Condor, now we have a second problem. We would have said just Die Spinne from Condor, except Condor had more than one version of it. So they had a first, second, third, and fourth series. So we're already getting a little complicated on this whole thing. And honestly, if you want to just stop and call ComicBase technical support for advice on some of this stuff, we have a whole article we used to include in the help manual called The Black Art of Title Naming, which we're happy to, to go through with the whole thing because it can get a little strange. All right, what we're going to do for the sake of this particular argument right now is we're going to invent a new series called Die Spinne, and we'll make it the Condor 5th series. All right, so we're going to go Spinne, as I type here, Spinne, comma D, and we're going to go Condor, comma 5th series. All right, you'll notice as soon as I type something that was not seen in the list below, that the list kind of goes away and I'm left with just a single OK button. I'm going to go ahead and hit that. All right, and that brings me to the new publisher, the new title dialog, because I'm just entered a brand new title. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the country. All right, why do I care about choosing the country? Well, other than being kind of interesting, if I choose the country, it's going to tell me effectively what the currency is going to be, because those two are linked, throughout time and history. Germany, if this was published in the 1970s, that would have been the Deutschmark. These days, it's going to be the euro is going to be the currency that's most, innately linked with Germany. Let's go ahead and say this thing was published from 2023 on. Whoops, sorry. Wrong field. Let's make this one is from Condor, and we'll say it's from 2023 to present. All right. Now, you don't need to put anything else in there if you don't want to. You couldn't, if you want to write an essay about, what this comic book was all about, by all means, feel free to. If you want to fill in the copyright, great idea, but you're not required to. Once you put in the title and the publisher, those are the only two fields you have to put in. Do fill in the country properly, though, because like I say, it's going to set the currency code, based on the country, and you'll want to have that done for you already. All right, so I'm going to hit save. And now it's going to take me to, all right, we've created the title, and now we want to say, let's fill in some issues. Now, I'm going to make issues 1 through 10 of this one. And it looks like I started this one out in the wrong place, so let's go ahead and set the currency to euros. Right there. All right, and I'm going to say this thing sells for 2 euros. And now some interesting stuff happens. All right. You'll notice what I did here is I'm saying I'm creating regular issues number 1 through 10, regular editions all, and I'm saying their cover price at 2 euros. Now, immediately, it suggested a valuation of this one for $2.25. Why? All right, what's that all about? And what it comes down to is it knows that my database currently, because I'm an American dude, typing this in from Franklin, Tennessee, my database is currently set to US dollars throughout the entire thing. It knows that my Windows system settings are based in dollars and so forth. And so it knows that my base currency is the dollar. So what it's doing right then is it's figuring out what on average is the exchange rate between $1 US and a euro, and then multiplying that up. 2 of those rounded to the next sensible number is going to be $2.25. Now, it might, in reality, if we multiply it to the 14th decimal place, be like $2.23, but nobody prices a comic book like that. So we round to the next sensible number. So if I'd said that this thing was in, I don't know, what's another Canadian dollars? Actually, I'll bet you that's pretty similar, and so forth. But anyway, it would go ahead and if I said it was US dollars and these were not filled out, it would default them to $2 flat. If it was Canadian dollars or whatever else, it would basically figure out what $1 US in the current scheme of things is, and take it from there. All right, now this one, because we're really dealing these days with euros, so let's go ahead and flip this to euro. We're going to pin issues 1 through 10. I'm just going to go down here and hit save, and then boom, it just created issues 1 through 10 of Die Spinne from Condor. And that's kind of all I got to do for that scenario of things. Now, if I want to create my own pictures or drag them in, That works the same as any other title on the whole database. I would take issue number 6. If I had a picture of it, I'd call it 6.jpg. I would drag it out of the title and it would appear under the title and so forth. And so, you'd be good to go. All right. Let's talk about some of the weird little specifics of this one. And let's do this with a title that's a little, easier to point and point the cursor at right now. So let's look at Superman. So we have the first series, the Canadian editions, the second series, so forth. But let's talk about Superman from Navarro, which is the Mexican version of Superman we were talking about earlier on. And I'm going to point out a couple of interesting little wrinkles in this one. All right, so here's Superman from Navarro. All right, the very first thing to point out is it's not Superman, it's Superman, right? We have an accent over the A. But I still could have found it just by typing like this, Superman parenthesis Navarro without the accent. The search is going to automatically search based not only on the exact thing you type, but also on all the permutations that make any kind of normal sense to people typing on English keyboards, especially. In other words, stripped of diacriticals, special characters, and so forth. It'll find matches by that as well. So you don't need to worry when you're typing, to search for things. You don't need to worry about all the little fuzzy symbols on top of things if they're not on your keyboard or whatever else. Just type it normally, it'll find it. You also don't need to worry about capitalization or anything else like that. So let's go ahead. We found Superman from Navarro here, and it tells us, okay, this is the Spanish language reprints from Superman first series and so forth. Ran from Navarro Publishing from 52 to 85. If you click up here, you'll see that little flag up there that says this thing is from Mexico. If you haven't memorized all the world's flags, obviously it'll give you some help on that one. I was an old stamp collector once upon a time back in the day, and the World Stamp album used to come with a little album that had all the world's flags on it, and you could cover up all the legends on it and see how many you could guess. But I'm guessing that's not a hobby for most of y'all. All right. So let's go in. I had a couple points. I want to make them in order and then move on. So let's go back to Die Spinne for a second. Sorry. Spinne. Oh, sorry. Come on, keyboard. There we go. Die Spinne. There we go, from Condor. All right. A couple things. There is a list of, and it's actually a surprisingly small number of about 14 or 15 articles, the definite articles that are common amongst all the Western languages. In other words, all the ones you could ever type on a Western keyboard. And it's only about 14 of them. So it's like le, la, die, das, the, a, an, and I remember one of the Belgian, Dutch ones, I believe, is det, so forth. But it's a surprisingly small number. If you have a definite article in your title, again, put it at the end. So it's Spinne, comma the. It's the one that's really hard for us Americans, because we're so used to this in modern parlance, is when we think about a title like El Diablo. Properly done, you ought to think of it as the Diablo, right? So Diablo is just a devil. So it's El Diablo. It's Diablo, comma El, not El Diablo when you're creating the title. So please try to get that in right. It's kind of weird, and like I say, ComicBase will find it both ways. So if you get it wrong, it'll still try to do it, but it'll sort weird if you don't put it in right. Just when you think about things like the Avengers, you don't want the Avengers to sort under T. You want it to sort under A for Avengers. Same thing goes for if you're a Spanish language speaker. El Diablo, the devil, you want to sort under D, not E, right? So, for all American type folks, let's try to get that right. Same thing, especially goes for le, and la for for French and so forth. All right, special characters. All right. Let's go back and talk about our friend Superman over here and talk about what a pain in the butt special characters are for American keyboards and what do you got to do with that. So Superman Navarro. Okay. All right. And let's have a look at that Superman up there, the accented A. How the heck do you type that? All right. Well, there's a couple different ways of getting there if you're an American. The first way you can get that A in, if you have to type it, is you pull up a utility that's built into Windows since the start called Character Map. This is an annoying program. It's it's primitive as all get out. I mean, this thing looks like it was pulled from Windows 1.0 because it probably was. I'm not sure if it certainly the vintage of it looks no more recent than Windows 3.0 in terms of like how wonderful and easy it is to use. You can't even drag the window out and make it larger to see the entire character set. All right. So if I'm looking for that little accented A in the lowercase here, the way I'd find it is I go down here and it's this guy right here. It's Unicode, is U plus 00E1 Latin acute A with accent. This is insane. This is a crazy way to find anything, but this is what Windows gives you by default. And so the way that they would like you to type this, if you were just typing, is you would type the Alt key and then you'd hit 0225 on your keyboard, and then it would kick out a accented A. If you do that a lot, I guess you could just remember it, but that's nuts, right? No one should ever be asked to enter keys like that. Realistically, unless you just have a mind for the sort of thing and like it, and like remembering, keyboard shortcuts, what I would suggest do is whenever you don't know where a character is go for character map, find the character when you got it. Once you've found it, select it, hit copy, and then just paste it wherever you need to put it. So if I need an accented A, there it is right there. All right, there's a better way, and the better way involves a utility called Windows Power Toys, which is kind of fun to play with anyway. Now, Windows Power Toys, and it looks like this is the installer for it, Power Toys setup right over here, is a set of utilities that were built into Windows that the developers were really hot on. The people who make Windows itself over at Microsoft, they said, hey, wouldn't it be great if Windows did this? And for one reason or another, they couldn't sell it through Microsoft's admin to get it made as part of the major features of Windows itself. But then, being programmers, as programmers will do, they just built them anyway. And they said, well, okay, we'll have a special public domain add-on to Windows where if you do this stuff, then we'll add in these features that we tried to get into the operating system automatically and you wouldn't let us. So good for them, and also good for Microsoft for tolerating it on at least some level. Because having Power Toys around does make certain things much easier. There are Power Toys around for everything from snapping windows to different weird positions, for showing which process has locked open a file when you're trying to delete something and says it can't do it because that file's in use by another program. There's dozens of them. By all means, go and just pull up in Windows Internet Explorer or your favorite web browser, look up, it's called Microsoft Power Toys right here. And you'll find it, the installer over here on GitHub. Just go ahead and download the latest installer here and have a look at them. There's a lot of stuff worth doing in the whole thing. It's the whole kitchen sink full of interesting gizmos. But the one that we care about today is the one that allows us to sensibly type accented characters. So let's say I'm just using this as a typing area right now. So let's say I want to type that accented A. Now, as an American, I would just type an A. Well, actually, I'm not going to type it into the search bar because it's going to try to autocomplete on me. Let me pull up Notepad here, and then we can do this a little bit more sensibly. All right, here's Notepad. All right, I'm going to make the font stupidly large. All right. Okay, so here I am, and I'm just typing. So, A, B, C, D, E, F, and so forth, right? All right, if I want to type an accented A, what we do in Power Toys is if you've got that installed on your machine, is you type in the first character. So there's the A, and now, with the A held down, and I'll do it here, if I type A, and then I hold the space bar down, it will offer me right at the top of the screen, it's hard to do with the magnifier over here, all the versions of that letter that the different keyboards that are installed on your system allow you to have, including the glyph AE, which is sort of interesting. So at that point, here's my accent A here. I just typed an A, I held down the A, and then while holding down the A, I hit space, and I'm just going to choose this one right over here, the A with the accent over it, and whoops, let's try that again, A, space. And there's my accented A. Okay, this is a terrible demo because I'm playing around with screen magnification. I'm shooting myself in the foot. Let me see if I can do this. All right, I'm typing A, space. There's my accent appears. I hit return, and there's my accented A right there. Okay, this is a more sensible way to type this stuff. All of it realistically is terrible compared to what you have to do on Macs. Macs are way, 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 way better for doing this sort of thing. And what we do in ComicBase, I'll admit, is we actually create what our editors do in-house is we create a custom keyboard layout, which is the comic-based keyboard layout. If you guys write me after the show at pbickford@human-computing.com, I'm happy to send you a copy of that one. But it basically is an alternate keyboard layout where instead of typing, these things like accent A or ellipsis or whatever else, you basically hold down the control key, type, what the close character is on the keyboard, which magically you will discover is exactly the same keyboard shortcuts you would have used if you had an actual Mac, and it'll do all the special characters for you. But that's how we do it. A second best alternative is to use Power Toys. Third best alternative is Character Map, but you got to get the characters in there right because again, it's if you don't speak the language, it comes off as strange, and it's very tempting to want to kind of cram everything into the lowest common denominator, unaccented language and so forth. But if you're actually a native speaker of any of these languages, an N with a tilde over it, it makes a nya sound. It doesn't, in Spanish, it doesn't make a na sound. It makes a nya sound. It's a different letter. The same thing goes for, German, characters like, an O sound makes a sound like ah, a sound like, a O with what's called an umlaut, the two little dots over it, makes a sound like they're different letters. And matter of fact, if you had a German keyboard, you would have different letters on the keyboard for the different sounds. So try to get it right. It's important. I hate to say it, it's a pain in the butt, but it's worth doing. All right, next thing on the list. We talked about special characters, values. All right, let's talk about the values in the database. All right, so wow, I keep on switching to the other PC. Apologize about that, guys. I'm going to get this straight one of these days. All right. When you get your database, fresh out of the box, fresh bake refresh, when you start it, it's going to be installed with US, dollar values. Now, the very first time you load it up on your computer, though, it's going to look at your Windows settings and say, okay, I'm set to US dollars as my default currency. Is US dollar the default currency of of what you're using right now? So in other words, if you booted this up on a French Canadian system, you would get a message right when ComicBase starts for the first time saying, hey, the values of this database are set in US dollars. Your Windows system settings right now are set to, Canada. Did you want to transfer, did you want to convert all the values in the database to Canadian dollars, CAD, at the current exchange rate? At which point you've got a couple different choices. You can say, yeah, do it, don't do it, or treat it as if it had already been done. Now, if you like, and to our shock, we found that many people in Germany actually work this way. They actually do their most everyone we've dealt with in Germany actually does their entire comic book world in US dollars. We thought, we've gone through all this hell trying to download at current exchange rates and get everything set up, perfectly to, say, okay, so a Deutschmark is worth, 0.3 US dollars or whatever the thing was at the time we first implemented it. And so clearly someone who's running this whole thing over in Berlin will want to be running it in whatever the local currency is. No, turns out that if you actually go to the comic shops in like Frankfurt or whatever else, they have little stickers next to everything saying, all right, yeah, here's the the month's comic books came in, here's the current US dollar exchange rate, and they tell you what it is in dollars the entire time. And the vast majority of our German customers actually told us after we implemented it the first time, they said, yeah, thanks for the currency conversion, but we actually prefer to do everything in US dollars. It's like, what? Shocker to us, but that was what they won, so we made that certainly an option that they can have. If you choose to, a very common one is if you're in Canada and you want to switch the entire database's values to Canadian dollars, what it will have done is every time you launch the program, it checks and says, hey, is it a new day? If it is, it says, have I got the new day's exchange rates downloaded from the world server that we query for these sorts of things? And if so, then it says, okay, Canadian dollars worth $1.03 or whatever the thing is today. And then if you switch over, it'll then multiply every data value in the database by whatever the reciprocal of that is to get you the current value in the local currency. Values will be carried over to the nth digit. I mean, it's precise to the nth degree. That's for the actual value. The prices will always be rounded to something sensible. So in other words, If it would come out that you were, $1.03 in Australian dollars, we're not going to price the comic book at $1.03. We're going to price it at $1 Australian. We're not going to do that. So it rounds it to sensible increments, as defined by our version of sensible. So basically, it starts out at like nickels when you're dealing with very small amounts, up to about 60 cents. Then it switches to dimes, then quarters, then 50 cents, and it goes all the way up to $5 or $50 increments when you're talking about $10,000 comic books, or $100,000 comic books. Anyway, that's one thing. Next thing is, again, you're not required to switch your database value at all. If you're ever in doubt about where your database is, you can't recall what database you're running in, typically at the very top of the screen, if I were running this on a US dollar based system, but all my values were in a different currency, like, well, let me switch that around. Let's say I was running this up in Canada, but all the database values in US dollars, it would say right at the top here, this is ComicBase 2023 4K Archive Edition, and it's Livestream Pete's Comics, and then CAD values. It'll actually say right at the end of it, that the values are in something non-native. If I want to change it after I was given that initial warning, and I somehow said, no, I don't want to do that right now. The way to get to it later, and it'll tell you in this message, is go under the file menu, go to collection statistics down here. Give it just a second to grind. And then, and if this were a really good demo done by a proficient podcaster, I'd have switched my system ahead of time to some like Canadian dollars so you could see this. But then over here under database info, you would see, they would say the currency for the database, it was set to US dollars. But if I was running on a Canadian system, it would say, did you want to change this to Canadian dollars? It would give you a button right there to switch it to the local currency. And if so, it would go ahead and do that repricing for you as you go. All right, that's where that is found if you ever want to do it after the fact, if you're running in a non-native currency. Depending on whether you've switched and or whether you have said skip it or don't skip it or whatever else, you can occasionally, and I do mean occasionally, get into a situation where your database values, they were in one currency, they were partially updated to another currency, but now things are just a little ambiguous. Or let's say you'd stopped it in the middle of doing the conversion or something like that. And we'll get this call about twice a year. So for the two people who will call us this year, this one's for you. If you ever have a doubt that your currencies are being updated properly in your local currency, there's a couple of different ways you can force it to kind of have a relook at the entire thing. One of them is if you go under the updates, if you've switched your Windows settings to be in a different currency, let it trigger that alert. It'll always, go ahead and reset things then. Another way is if you just want to force it to, reset all the pricing flags. So if there are any new values at all to be had in the entire database, is just hold down the Alt key when you launch ComicBase and keep it held down until the program fully launches. You'll see a message that does it saying it's resetting the pricing flags. That takes only just a minute or so. And then the next time you download an update, it'll always download all the values in your local currency for the database. And so it'll reset it that way. So if, like I say, for whatever reason, if you've got an old database and it doesn't feel like it's updating properly in your local currency, hold down the Alt key. It should get you there. All right, other things that are going on. All right, one of the limits we've got going on here of the database, and I'm going to just apologize for this one because we don't have a great deal of control over it. All right, if you'll look very carefully at the way that we display some of the stuff, we'll say things like, okay, the cover price is 0.80 watts, 0.80 Mexican pesos for this, issue number 3 here. All right. Which, does this one even have a visible cover price? No. Anyway, if maybe they had it on the back, don't know. But anyway, but if you did have it, it said 80 Mexican pesos, right? The problem we've got here is the price we show here with the formatting. It shows here with where there's a comma at the thousands place, there's a dollar sign to the left. That formatting we show for price is always going to be displayed using the local currency on your copy of Windows. So in other words, let's go ahead. I'm going to exit out of ComicBase here and let's pull up those Windows regional settings just so you can see what I mean about some of this stuff. All right. The way you get to that one is you go in Windows, you type region settings right here. And this allows you to, Windows actually does a hell of a job with this. I'm gonna say, if I were trying to design a computer system that worked all around the world, you'd hardly do better than what Windows does here. But I'm gonna say, okay, I now live in Ukraine. Sure. Yeah, let's do Ukraine. And we're using the standard Ukrainian uh, versions of things. Actually, I don't even know what their currency over here. Let's switch to something I actually know at least a little bit. Let's go to Sweden. All right, here we go. All right. Now, in Sweden, and you can actually see what the format looks here. We'll switch to Swedish. Oh my goodness, Swedish formatting for England over here. Where are we at? St. Vincent's, Sweden. English as done in Sweden. All right. If you see down at the bottom here, as soon as I said I'm going to still run in English, but I want to do it as they would do it over in Sweden, you'll notice that, okay, we kept the Gregorian calendar. Good deal. The first day of the week switched from Sunday to Monday. Interesting. The way you write short dates went year, month, date now instead of month, day, year like we do in America. Long dates look the same. Times are suddenly in 24-hour clock because that's how they do over there. And digits roll like that. The other parts of the world, for instance, will use things like commas instead of where in America we would use periods for the decimal place and so forth. And all that kind of formatting is going to be spaced entirely upon your Windows settings on this one. Now, this is one where I'm just going to cop to it and say, like, we've got some control over the way that this is displayed in ComicBase, but this is one thing we don't try harder than we need to try to display it in ways outside of your Windows setting. We're basically assuming that your Windows setting is the way you want to see things. All right, and here's what the message I was giving you beforehand. It says, all right, I've now told my copy of Windows that I am in Sweden and I'm viewing the database in English and I want everything done in the Swedish versions. It says, all right, price values in your database are listed in US dollars. Do you want to convert them to your system's native currency, the Swedish krona? And if you don't, the US dollar will continue to be your database value currency, although the currency symbols displayed may be incorrect unless you change your Windows number settings to match. All right, and that tells me I can go back over the collection settings if I need to go and do this later on. All right, so now let's look at the way that this is displayed. Now, notice I'm still here on Superman from Navarro, a Mexican comic book, looking at it as if I were currently viewing this on a Swedish system. Now the cover price switched instead of a 0.80 for the cover price, it now is comma 80 because Sweden apparently uses the comma for the decimal, not the thousands grouper. And for the thousands grouping, for the price, they apparently use a space, 200. So it's 2,200 kroners now, and the KR kroner goes at the end. So whatever you've got on your local Windows settings it's what you're going to see in ComicBase. It's what you're going to see on reports. Make sure it's the way you want to see it, because we are not we love y'all, but we're not crazy enough to try to reformat every number, every date, everything else in a way which is different than your native currency. That I gotta say that's too much work. It's it's to keep an idea that that your computer might have one currency, your preferred viewing state might be a second currency, and your the currency of a given comic might be a third currency. That is beyond confusing. So we are really assuming that your Windows regional setting is the way that you prefer to see values displayed. So make sure you've got that right. All right, now I'm going to get out of here, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch back to US dollars because we want to move on and talk about some other stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and exit the database backup. And now the way to get back here, I'm going to go to regional settings. And once again, I'm going to go down to my country. I'm going to set this now to United States. And I'm going to switch it to US English. So, United States. All right, so great. I'm now back in America. All right, now when I launch my database, because I didn't convert the database over, it's checking because it knows that I did a currency switch. So it's doing that reset of the pricing flags right now because it knows I pulled some stuff. But it's only going to do that. It's only going to do that for a couple of seconds here while we get set up here. It's not going to go and reprice the entire database. All right, and we're just about back here. Come on. All right, there we go. And now we're back at Superman. All right, um, so all right, US. Oh, okay. So we talked about how to set the pricing flags. Hold down if you ever feel like you need to hold down the Alt key as you launch a database. It'll do that little reset that you saw just now. But the other thing is very important. If you ever sell your books on Atomic Avenue, all right, the pricing. So let's say I chose to have my database in Swedish kroners, right? I'm absolutely free on my own to keep the pricing in Swedish kroners all day long. Atomic Avenue is not that they're not that hip. They're going to assume that your selling price is always in US dollars because they don't do currency conversion. ComicBase does, but Atomic Avenue does not. So if you're selling to your Atomic Avenue store or frankly to eBay or to whatever else, assume that whatever the native price of that system is what you're going to be pricing at. Don't assume that they're going to undo all the work and flip to different prices other than the ones you're staring at. So anyway, if you do intend to sell on Atomic Avenue, I would say keep your pricing in US dollars. Otherwise, it's going to be absolute misery for you. And especially if you're in one of these, things that has a divide by 100 to get to the US price, kind of price on the whole thing, misunderstandings may occur. Although strangely, in the entire history of doing an Atomic Avenue integration, not sure if it's ever actually happened. It might have happened once, but I think you get a message the first time you post about that, or it could be wrong about that. But pricing on Atomic Avenue is all US dollars, so keep that straight if you do sell to that system. All right, so I've been talking for a long time, and before I do my closing note on this one, deal with a little bit of stuff here. Ora wants to point out SAG-AFTRA is the Screen Actors Guild dash American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Just yeah, acronyms. They're funny. Let's see. He also asks, how do editors manage what must be almost impossible task of finding values for foreign books? So and I'll just cop to it when things are great and when they're not. Yeah, I'm gonna say this is one where I mean it probably is impossible. But what we come, so the pricing in ComicBase comes down from about 2.1. I don't know if I think we're at 2.2 million, but I don't swear to it right now. Data points we analyze every year from, every week from Atomic Avenue and Heritage Auctions, right? So if you've got a copy of Die Spinne from Condor, number 43, which strangely enough, I actually sold. Copy I picked up on vacation in Germany. I sold it not so recently on Atomic Avenue. The job of the ComicBase price editors is to start the pricing discussion of how it would sell in a world market based on values from things like Atomic Avenue and Heritage, right? So your mileage is going to vary wildly, and shipping certainly will play an interesting part in this whole thing. But their job is to start and say, okay, yeah, we think this one might be worth, say, $5, right? Or whatever the thing is. And what happens after that is as people post other things, that price will get moved up, down, or sideways based on whether the new things were posted higher or lower, whether the sales came in higher or lower. They're going to move that starting price, however that was. So their job is to be somewhere in the basic vicinity of that to start the pricing conversation. Now, this all works great as long as there is a pricing conversation, right? So if it turns out you're going to post a little known Brazilian kids comic book from 1958 onto Atomic Avenue, and if it sits there and does not sell for 5 years, there's no pricing data to move that from whatever it got posted at originally. Now, the second it sells at anything else, or the second someone else says, "Hey, that price is wildly wrong. Let me put it a much more realistic price into the whole thing." The second that happens, well, then again the price will start to move towards whatever the average of the discussion is. But if things come up there and they just kind of sit, there is no market per se on some of these things, and some of these things there really isn't. You actually, to a lesser extent, find this with some very, very small press comics or indie comic books where somebody Xeroxed off, 20 copies of their like Ode to Bucky's before the show. They get sold for $3 at the show, but unless you're at the show, you were never going to feel like you wanted to buy that comic book ever. At which point it's going to stay at $3 forever, until someone sells one for $50 at an auction. But anyway, but that's how the whole thing starts. Some interesting commentary we've gotten in the past on that is, "Hey, where are some of these prices coming from? I'm over in Germany. I would love to buy these books for, that price." And to the extent that the price is just plain wrong, by all means, use the request price check thing and give us some other data to look at where they might rethink their initial position. But then the other thing that can't be solved in a satisfactory manner, I think, is what do you do when, yeah, I would buy it for this price in one country, but if we're buying it from across the world, it'd be a completely wildly different price. Let's say that, for instance, I collected the Eaglemont graphic novels, where if you just saw them laying around in a comic shop in America, they'd be going for $20 each. End of story. That's kind of the end of it. If you saw them just laying around in a shop over in England, they'd be going for $9 each. End of story. But for me to get them from England to America, it cost me $37. So what's the US price on that one? Well, the answer is whatever it took me to, as you're buying and selling these, the whole thing, it's whatever the closing price was exclusive of shipping. So shipping doesn't actually, it gets figured into your purchase decision, but it doesn't get figured into the price of the sale when the systems are transacting business. In other words, on heritage auctions, if something moves at auction, they will factor in the the buyer's premium on that, which I think is like 15 or 18%. Because if I bought something for $100, I literally have to give you a check for $115 in order to take possession of the thing. And then we talk about how to, get it to me, right? So then shipping is on top of that. But the price that gets fed back into the system of what the selling price on a $100 item on it, with a 15% buyer's premium on Heritage is 115. If the price that I were buying a comic book off of Atomic Avenue or eBay or any place else, that we monitor for pricing, if it says, yeah, you paid $9, but you also paid $37 in shipping, the thing that we're going to see is $9. We're not going to see the 37 in shipping, but we will also see that it didn't necessarily move particularly quickly. And so the weird part is the guide value is going to tend to fall until people, hit a price where you will actually close the business. So, yeah, take all this with, in mind as you go. Don't look for super precision as you're seeing some of these faraway pricing on things, because some of these factors are outside of the realm of that which we calculate. So anyway, great question on that one. So hopefully we didn't do it. Fabian says, I've already found some Belgian comic series in ComicBase. Like being incredible to put them all in. Yeah, we have more than Tintin alone. Yes, I know. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. As you enter new books in, please right click on them as you do submit new titles and say submit as new or corrected data. I'm going to show that one because it's so incredibly important. So let's say you just entered Superman from Navarro, which I guarantee someone did at one point because I know nothing about Superman from Navarro. So someone entered in, got us going on the whole thing. We seem to believe that issue number 1 is set you back around $2,200, which just, looking at it off the top of my head strikes me as, could be in the realm of possibility. Doesn't strike me as wildly wrong. But after you enter them, highlight along the left-hand side here, to highlight all the issues you did, right click, and then say submit new or corrected data. When you do that, it gets sent to our editors, which then can add that to the master database, and it also puts the onus on them that first time to go off and at least start the pricing on what the whole thing should be. Although we often reach out to folks if we have no idea and say, well, we don't really know anything about this series. What can you tell us, to try to get us going on on setting at least an initial price on stuff. All right, so let's see here. Fred asks, is Power Toy still officially available? Yes, it is. Just updated to version 0.71 just a couple of days ago. Yeah, it's definitely worth doing. The window snapping I use a lot. The finding out what process lock to file I use a lot, but the accented characters is probably my number one go-to on this one. Greg suggesting what do if you really aren't able to get the correct special characters on a new title that you submit to the database. Option 1, post a message on the ComicBase message boards, explain what needs to be fixed in your submission. Yes, make sure you put attention Mark Castaneda in your message if that Mark sees it, or you can just say ComicBase editorial. Mark's our go-to guy on most of the stuff, so feel free to call him out by extension. But honestly, if you send it to the general mailbox, we'll also just forward it on to him if we need to. And Greg also says, if you're on Human Computing Slack, post them thread and ping Mark so you can get to it in a timely fashion. Yeah, not a bad idea. All right. Yeah, and I will not be doing the Swedish chef impressions. All right. Steve says, the window display, when you change currency, there's a missing space. Yeah, I saw that too. I was just embarrassed. I was hoping I was going to get past that without you guys seeing it, but that's another typo to fix in the next build. But all right, let's see here. And now we're just giving people, okay. Rob asks, are you able to change just the cover date format from US to another one in England? You can change the date format, but it's all in your regional settings. Um, I mean, you can customize in Windows, anything you want, but it's just remember, ComicBase, the reporting, everything about it is going to use whatever your Windows settings are set to. So if you prefer to just always see things in year, month, day format, yeah, knock yourself out. I mean, everything will work fine on your system, and that's how you'll see all your dates in the future if you do that. All right. And Greg Hicks also wants to remind everyone it's PSA time. Yes. Number one, Hulk likes. Yeah. Yes. Please like Hulk. Smash the like and subscribe buttons, please. And do not forget that we have a dedicated forum on the message boards. A dedicated thread for live stream topics. And then finally, oh yes, and there's a tournament where you can get Andre's cover catalog, which is a very cool thing if you want to see all the stuff printed out, which is it's quite a thing. Let's just say that. All right. Last thing I want to say about this stuff, and I know this got esoteric as all get out. We're running a little bit long, but thank you for hanging with me. Certain foreign characters. So I was praising Windows earlier for handling foreign characters and everything else amazingly well. And given we have nearly 300 recognized countries on the globe. You have gajillions of characters in different languages, date times, and I mean the internationalization issues are just off the freaking hook. I mean, there are certain countries that recognize different date boundaries and some that don't. I mean, it's absolutely insane what it has come to make things work across foreign currencies. And Microsoft does an amazing job on most of it. I mean, I got to hand it to them. But just like there are limits in some things that we did in ComicBase, there are limits in some things that Microsoft did that just they baked them in version 1.0 and they never went back. And some of those are the file name restrictions that they have for naming files in Windows. Now, remember, the deal with pictures in ComicBase is that if you want the picture to appear, you have to name it right after the issue and then drag it onto the folder and then it'll appear. So let's go back to our friend Superman from Navarro. If you right click on the picture here and I say show the picture file, all right, it'll show me that this entire thing is taking place in a directory called C users public documents human computing pictures N Navarro Superman parenthesis Navarro. You see what's missing here? That accent over the A. All right. Why is it missing? Because Windows decided, for reasons, that they didn't like accented A's in their file names. And so if you have an accented A, they look for it as just regular A. There are other ones, and honestly, the list doesn't make a great deal of sense to me. As far as characters currently used in European languages. In America, you can't use a colon in a file name. I almost understand that one. It almost derives from colon used to be the separator between paths, between folders and files on the Apple systems. And for whatever reason, the guys, when they did Windows, decided, yeah, there's no colons in our file names either. I don't really know why, but some programmers decided that was a good idea. Certain of the foreign characters are illegal as Windows file names. And I could not tell you the list. You would have to look it up. But when that is the case, it's not generally a problem for you because Windows will automatically make the right, ComicBase will automatically make the rightly named folder for you. All you got to do is have a file called 6.jpg and drag it in, and it'll do the right thing. It'll create the right folder. It'll stick it in the right place. It'll find it when it comes time. But one feature that we've got is you can actually drag whole folders full of files in. So if I had a folder full of Superman Navarro pictures and I had a folder full of 2000 AD folders or whatever else, you could drag those whole folders in ComicBase and have them load up the appropriate title and dump all the pictures in at once. That feature kind of breaks for a lot of the Windows file naming conventions that come up. So if you ever try that and it fails on you, don't judge us too harshly. We're bouncing up against Windows at that point. We'll just say, hey, yeah, we can't, like, for instance, you can't drop a folder in called 2000 AD, A.D. because a folder can't end with a period. Don't know why. It just, that was the rule. And so as a result, when you drop the folder and it tries to match up to the title, because you couldn't have a folder called 2000 A.D. It can't find the title called 2000 A.D. to match up with. And so it gives you a message saying, yeah, I don't know what title you're talking about. The solution on that one, pretty easy. In those rare cases, just in ComicBase, go to the appropriate title, 2000 AD, open up the folder, drag the individual files in, and it'll work. But yeah, some of the stuff, like I say, it's a little strange. But just be aware of that one, and you should be fine. Another one that comes up much more frequently is Windows will not allow you to have a slash in a file name, which comes up all the time for variants. Because, for instance, you want to talk about the 1/A variant or the 1/B variant. You can't have a file called 1/A, and so we tell people, yeah, put dash instead. So ComicBase will automatically look for things that have a dash in them and say, did you really, was this meant to be this, the variant with the slash in it? And we'll match that one automatically. So don't worry about too much. It will get done. All right. So I think that's about it for now. I'm getting talked out. Thank you for showing up on this one, and hope that hopefully answer your questions. If you have other questions about foreign comics or currency exchange or things like that, please feel free to send them to me at pbickford@comicbase.com. I will try to answer them as best I can. Other than that, I am off to Comic-Con next week. So you guys all have a good one, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care. Bye-bye. Yeah, this is going to be a hard end because I lost my cool outro music. See you next time. Bye-bye, guys.